Good morning. Denise Dryden here on Bainbridge Island. And I've often talked when this tree is in front of me because it's really big stuff. And I'm noticing that almost everything I've been talking about lately is big. And so today I want to talk about when we are emotionally addicted. What does that mean? Because I've been working with, I think I have 3, maybe 4 clients right now that are all sort of coming through this idea that they have this repetitive pattern that keeps coming up over and over and over again. And that there's some addiction model thinking and feeling going on that I want to talk about. So we're going to play with this sort of the different kinds of addiction, parenting, how it shows up in our relationships with our lovers, our partners, our children, and some tools on how we can break this down. Because our perception of the world is derived from our feelings. So our emotions are really going to tell us what the lens of the world looks like. So emotional addiction, it's internal. It's when the body is dependent on chemical responses. Make sense? When there's chemical responses that our body builds up a fluidity, an expectation with, a fight or flight, repetitiveness, it becomes addictive. So emotions, again, as we've talked about several times on these past videos, emotions are energy in motion. So the energy has a pattern to it. It has a ley line. It has a direct way that it's going to come in and tap us. Tap, 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 tap. And it's going to come in and it's predictable. And sometimes it's unpredictable, especially when we're in new settings. And it's unseen. So these are strong, persistent feelings that make us feel vulnerable, right? So when we have these activated energy hits, like somebody says something and it hits you right where there's a sore spot or a wound or somewhere where there's a story that you have associated with it, we attach a thought or story to it. It's like, ow, that. This makes me feel like this. I know this. This is what my internal story is. And so our neurotransmitters and our hormones create this chemical cocktail that goes right straight towards that. So it's like we feel something, we put a thought associated with it. All of the chemicals in our body go towards dealing with that, and it's a chemical cocktail. It's a rush. There's a body response to an emotional experience. And so we have, this experience, react, respond, and we get these hits, these cocktail hits, right? So addiction, it can be external. Well, it's always external. Let's be really clear. It comes from the external. So it can come from substances, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, video games, anything, substance sticky, or it can also come from behavior, which is repetitive behavior that we get used to or we don't know how to function without. It's an internal response to an emotional cocktail. So these patterns really show up when we're feeling dissonance, when we're not in touch with ourselves, or when we are sort of like, I don't know what that feeling is, but it doesn't feel good. And it's when there's dissonance or we're out of alignment or we're incongruent. And so they hit and our body tries to adjust with chemicals. It hits and our body tries to adjust with chemicals over and over and over again. So what we know is that whether it's pain, worry, fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, anger, victimhood, all of these things are going to be noticeable when they show up. So I've talked about these hot spots and these triggers all over our bodies in other videos, like, what happens when we're nothing but a walking, trigger, and that the people who love us the most, the people who are in our immediate world, are going to be the ones who are going to push on those. So that is going to be our partners. That is going to be our children. That's going to be our family. That's going to be our coworkers. That's going to be our friends. These are going to be the people who know us the best, and they're like, yeah, when I do that, watch her do this. And kids are really manipulative about this, especially teenagers and toddlers when they want something, right? So I'm going to go back and visit a concept that in 2012, when there was this huge shift, right? And everyone's looking around going, I didn't feel anything different. And I remember reading, it was saying somewhere between 2019 and 2020, things are really going to start, you're going to start feeling this shift. I thought, man, we've been preparing for this for 10 years and now we have 7 more years before something happens. And what they were saying, all of the the wisdom guiders from this shift was that get yourself healthy, release, let go of things, get yourself ready. Because what they didn't say, and I didn't understand, and I'm passing it on to you, is that in 2020, things are going to amp up. They're going to amp up so much that all we're going to do is feel everything, and then we're not going to know whether it's an old trigger or a new trigger. We're just going to go into overwhelm, shutdown, addiction model, and self-medicating. So when we say get ready, it means identify your triggers. Identify your reactions that you can feel in your body. Become an emotional detective. I really like this idea. Become the emotional detective. And so I'll give you some examples because some of them are things that they're all things I've personally experienced, and they're things that I'm now working with my clients, which is, let's start with one addiction, which is the busyness addiction, which is I have to overschedule and run, and, make sure that I'm always doing something, okay? There's a high stress level. Usually there's a lot of tardiness or late or forgetfulness or apologies to other people. And usually underneath it, there's this need to be busy, to avoid the things that you feel inside. If I feel that, I have to just go out and start getting busy again. So what we also do with that busyness is we create connection. Constant connection. If I meet somebody else, if I talk to her about her problems, if I coach soccer, if I run this board organization, if I am somebody who's doing meaningful work in the community and I'm busy all the time, then I feel in control. I feel important. I feel less lonely. I feel less afraid. And somehow I've attached my busyness to meaning, and I'm forgetting myself. So there's this constant fight or flight cocktail, which is almost, if you slow down, your body goes, you don't understand. We need a fix. You need to put some stress in here, right? Second example is when we look at the anger, judgment, finger pointing cycle, which is that where you've been hurt, you've been scared, you've been disappointed, you've been even betrayed by somebody or something, and you're turning around and you're looking for other examples. See, when you do that, that's just like this. When you do that, that's just like this. So there's judgment and scorekeeping and anger that's just below the surface, which is, I can't believe you did that again, right? And we do this with our teenagers, especially when they're pushing on boundaries. We do this with our spouses when we don't trust them, when they've broken our confidence. We do this with anything where we feel out of control. And when we're doing this from a parenting perspective, it's the one thing that our teenagers are just like, chill and stop. Because what we do is we hammer that other person over and over and over again with those original wounds, those original betrayals. And there's really nothing they can do, whether it's apologize or take responsibility for it, that we can really hear, because we're stuck in that loop of, if I'm not mad at you, I don't know what to do with my energy. And when I'm mad at you, when I'm in anger, I have an extra fuel. I got a cocktail going, right? And it's an addiction to the process of anger and judgment. I noticed that when in some of the adolescents in therapeutic programs, there's just no forgiving a kid who got arrested for being in possession or, dealing, or a kid who would refuse to go to school and failed. And it's just like this. I don't know what to do if you go back there and do that again, or if you say mean things to me like you did before. And so there's this repetitive cycle of just always going after the person for your anger at what they did initially. Third example, let's look at the, that one where you smile and you check out. I always call it, that's kind of like the spiritual bypassing one. It's where you avoid what doesn't feel good, and you go only towards the things that feel good. So you decorate the house. You shop for the perfect clothes. You are constantly talking about spiritual growth and spiritual awareness. And you go up out of your body into the light, and you're always talking about light things, not the real things. So you're not bringing it into your body and holding it in a day-to-day reality, especially dealing with your own pain or your own fears or your own stressors. There's this hyper focus on the outer world and controlling it. How do I look? How do my clothes look? How do I look on social media? How do I sound? And there's this disassociation from the body, so there's no groundedness going on. And what happens is that we think we're being looked at in the form of grace or kindness or leadership. And we are to a degree, but we're also in this constant push away, go over and feed it someplace else. And so that process also has its own emotional addiction. So those are 3 examples as parents, as adults, that we can get trapped in. What other patterns come up for you? What did you notice? What happens when you're overwhelmed? What happens when you're scared? What happens when you're sad? What happens when you're hurt or worried or anxious or depressed or when you're in pain? So emotional addiction is always going to go big or it's going to go small. If it goes big, it's responding to those emotional cocktails, those chemical cocktail hits, and it's moving people around and manipulating your world and trying to control it. And if it goes small, it's disconnecting, pulling back, isolating, going numb, and going flat. So it can go big or it can go small, right? So some tools that I came up with, because I spent some time this morning really looking at where, some of these are just so repetitive because they're always the same core tools. And they work only when you really use them. So the first one, I got steam coming out of my mouth. It must be really cold out here, colder than I thought. Is that as life ramps us up around us in 2020, we're going to need to have these tools really well honed. For some of us, we're going to deepen the ones we've been using. For others, we're going to start developing them for the first time, and we're going to get them really fast, right? So the first thing is to meditate. Meditate a minimum of 5 minutes a day. Sit down, notice where your thoughts go, notice where your emotions go, notice what you're feeling, and let them pass through. Don't grab them and act on them, and keep breathing and keeping your body calm. Number 2, let nature help. Get outside. Watch what happens in the change of the seasons, the way the sunlight changes when it's cloudy or when it's raining or when it's sunny out. We've got spring just starting. Watch how the trees start to bud. Little green shoots start to come up from the ground. Watch the activity of nature and let it inform you. Number 3, do some really deep self-care. Now's the time to take long baths, to get more sleep than you needed to drink lots of water, to do stretching and exercising, and to take magnesium every day, because magnesium helps the body loosen up its grip with stress. Number 4, pay attention to your food. All of our serotonin comes out of our gut, and that's what helps us, battle fight or flight. It helps us battle all of these stress levels, but our gut has to be healthy. So what are you putting in your gut? Stay away from processed foods, stay away from sugar, stay away from caffeine, stay away from gluten, stay away from anything that's conventional that has food poisoning on it, from glyphosate, anything that you can identify that might make it harder for your stomach to support you, start to slowly eliminate those. Number 5, build your own emotional awareness systems. Like get fluent on this. And one of the suggestions was beautiful. It's like, watch TV. Actually select Netflix, HBO, whatever group, Disney, whatever group you have. But select, I need to see something that's going to make me feel happy right now. I need to have something that's going to take me on an emotional roller coaster and see about love and vulnerability or courage or sadness. And I'm going to allow myself to open up and feel with it and let the movie train me. This is something I noticed that is my greatest tool, is that I go to movies when I need to process something, and I pick my movies very specifically, and I watch them and I allow them to inform me. Okay? Let them teach you. And last, build your emotional intelligence and reaction awareness. Notice when you're gripping and when you're going into anger, or when you're going into control, or you're going into avoidance, or you're going into bypass, and go, oh no, there it is. I didn't realize how many times a day I do this, right? So these are the kind of things that I do. You can always find me on DeniseStridenCoaching.com, and it's February 2nd. It's the halfway mark between winter and spring. So let's get out there and hope something spring arrives pretty soon, okay? Have a good Sunday. It's Super Bowl Sunday also. Have fun. Bye-bye.